And the third document over here is about monitoring. ZTNA, you have the tools, the SEM tools, everything is listed out under the monitor ZTNA connector. And lastly, the most important document which you should refer to is the Prisma Access Admin Guide. And what I've done is, if you click on this, you have an option to download this guide. It's a very big document. You can either use the keyword here to locate the ZTNA related admin guide pages, like how to configure, how to upgrade a ZTNA connector, for example. And then uh, this will show that this option is available on the ZTNA connector group. You have an icon here with a green icon, which indicates to you that there's an upgrade available. Once you click on it, then all the connectors within this connector group will be upgraded. So this is the admin guide. So alternately, what you can do is you can download this guide in a PDF file format, and later you can use it offline to go and look into the details over here. So it has a very detailed document. It has all the information required to understand how to configure the ZTNA connector and what all the knobs available in Startup Cloud Manager to help you build the configuration, to help you configure the virtual machine, help you deploy the OVF template. This is an extension of whatever we discussed in the last 2 days in terms of enabling you to use the product. Okay, so some people have preference to use the web-based admin guide. Some people prefer to use an offline version. The disadvantage with offline version, it won't be updated once you download it. The online version gets constantly evolved and updated as and when the updates are released in the document. Okay, so any information you search for, you will be able to locate it, and it will help you understand why is it meant, or what is the configuration meant for. Like, for example, preserve user user ID mapping for ZTNA connector. So this is one of the topic we discussed yesterday. So under the connector group, there's a preserve user ID option. So immediately it'll take you to the page where it has this information about ZTNA connector, and it'll show you the details of that. Okay, so these are the most important documents available for using the ZTNA solution and troubleshooting it and rightly sizing the virtual machines and configuring your security firewalls in your network so that the connector can do its function correctly. Okay. The last topic of the day is, there are two more topics. One is the ZTNA connector tunnel down issue. So this is mostly related towards once the connector is onboarded, once the tunnel is up, during your operational phase, whenever this problem happens, we need to use, if the control plane is up, you can use those diagnostic tools to do a ping towards the service IP of PA. You can do a, if it is not reachable, then you need to find out why this IP stopped working when it was previously working. Ping may be blocked by a firewall, but the UDP 4500 and 500 would be allowed. One major issue we have seen during the onboarding, onboarding of ZTNA connector, whenever the ZTNA connector is configured with the public IP, we need to ensure that the ESP traffic is allowed in addition to UDP 500 and 4500, because the tunnel will come up, but there will be no data exchange because the firewall might be blocking the protocol 50 ESP traffic for if it is not explicitly allowed between the connector and the PA service IP. Aside to this, if you're using a NAT, using NAT traversal, usually this problem is not seen. But you need to ensure that if you're using a public IP on the connector, physical interface, this is allowed. ESP traffic is allowed, and all the you can determine your service IP from the Prisma Access and then enable IPsec and IKE connections to be allowed outbound direction from the connector towards the Prisma Access. Always the connection is initiated from the connector, and we need to permit it in the outbound direction. Okay. This is one corner case where sometimes I mentioned to you the booting will not work. and you will be stuck in booting. You are helpless because you don't have a prompt to go inside the connector and troubleshoot it. Connector is not onboarded. Connector is not available online through the SEM for diagnosing the problem because it's not yet onboarded. So you need to, at this point we cannot do anything further in this one. But what you need to make sure is based on your platform, whether it's KVM or Hyper-V or ESX. For here, I have the steps listed for ESX. The virtualization admin needs to enable serial console, and we need to the tag needs to be engaged for troubleshooting the issue and identify where the problem is. So how to set up the serial console on a ZTNA connector in ESX is listed out here. There is a firewall setting in ESX host that needs to be configured to allow incoming connection to remote serial port. And this is how you need to set up the VM serial port. And you need to connect through telnet via PuTTY to your serial connection of the ZTNA connector, and then you'll be given a prompt, a Linux prompt, from where we can further investigate the problem. So this is something which many users have a challenge to because they are not VM specialists. They need to engage their VM team. So I just managed to just have a short recording to explain the settings, how to configure it, and you have the server. You over here you have the server. Sorry. Okay. You need to set up the direction as server, and then you need to define the URI as telnet 10, the IP address of the ESX host, and then any random port number. So once you specify the setting, and then you boot up the machine, and then do a telnet towards this IP. So you will see that it's please wait booting, it will be stuck in it. So here this serial console of the connector will give you a prompt, and from here we can go and diagnose the problem. If you see, this is how you troubleshoot when you're stuck in booting. It's a corner case scenario, but if you end up in this situation, you need to find a way to have a serial access to the connector to further investigate. Okay, so I've just shown it for ESX, and it applies to all the other hypervisor platform to troubleshoot it. This is not a problem which is seen in the marketplace VMs because it's fully tested and fetched from the marketplace. But in on-prem deployments, uh, you need to make sure that you have this option available to troubleshoot. How to manage application and connect IP block. So when you go inside this URI path, workflow Prisma access setup, you have a gear icon here. So under the infrastructure settings. So once you click on the gear icon, you will be allowed to add or remove the IP blocks. So when you configure the connector IP address blocks, you can configure it carefully. The update or delete of connector blocks can be done only after deleting all the existing connectors or connected groups. So this is a caveat you need to take into consideration. So plan it well so that you don't need to keep on changing this configuration. One thing I mentioned yesterday, that this is a commitless solution for ZTNA connector itself. All the components within the ZTNA connector are based on commitless architecture, Anycast architecture. So you don't need to perform commits after every change you make. It's live configuration that's getting applied. But when you're doing a modification to the connector block or application block, you need to commit and push the configuration to Prisma Access. This is similar to any other infrastructure setting you would do. You need to do that. So that is the only place where the commit is required. Okay. So ZTNA connector frequently asked questions, which most of them we had covered in the session, but still I have summarized it here. So ZTNA connector internet or LAN interface IP address modification post onboarding feasibility. It's not possible to change. In case you want to change the IPs, what you can do is use a DHCP and manage the IPs to a DHCP server. But if you have configured something during the onboarding as a static IP, you cannot modify it post onboarding currently. The connector token is valid for 72 hours. We discussed in detail about it. And the connector recommended configuration for updating interface IP address without re-onboarding As I mentioned, if you have DHCP, you can manage the IP through DHCP. But if you do not have a DHCP or configured statically, and the connector is already onboarded, there's no option available currently to change the IP. Okay. ZTNA connector CPU utilization is high in monitoring tools. So I showed you the inside screen where it showed the utilization CPU. You should take that into consideration. By default, the connector ZTNA connector will consume all the cores, even though there's no traffic in it, and show high in your monitoring tool. But in reality, that's not what's the utilization. The utilization you see in the graph is what you should use as your baseline to understand the CPU and memory utilization of the connector, ZTNA connector. ZTNA connected two arm to one arm. So sometimes customers have a need to modify their design where they try to they deployed initially two arm and they realize we don't need two arm, we need a one arm deployment. So once you have deployed it, you can't change it. So that's how simple it is. So if you want to make any changes into the number of interfaces or anything post onboarding, you need to redeploy the connector. So here, if you notice, like if you have these changes in the future, and if you have multiple connectors within the connector group as well as in the location in the same connector group, you have an option to stage your. You can decommission one connector, deploy it with the new configuration, while the other connector is still supporting the private apps, and then plan uh, um, plan to do the next connector. So you have sufficient resiliency and availability in your network when you have multiple connectors deployed for the same location within the connector group. Recommended connector deployment, as I mentioned, minimum of two is the recommended one, so that you have two tunnels to anchor and set and give access to the private apps for the users. No single point of failure, because if you have a single connector, you have a single tunnel, and the connector is down or the tunnel is down, all the users lose access to the apps. How to determine PA service IP for ZTNA connector? From the tech support file, I showed you that it is under dump service link. You can see the IP, or in the interface of the IPsec tunnel, you can see the service IP. Also from the Starter Cloud Manager connector group, you'll be able to see the service IP. Does ZTNA connector support backup and restoration for the virtual machine? It doesn't it's not supported because of the uh, unique IDs and keys used by the machine. We cannot like restore or backup from here. If you have any, if the disk is destroyed in the hypervisor, you need to redeploy it. How can I change my Prisma access location for ZTNA connector? So once when the connector is onboarded, it will send its public IP towards the PA controller, and then the nearest location to which is available to the physical location of the ZTNA connector based on its public IP, it will anchor to the nearest location. This is an automated process. We do not have any mechanism to modify it or change it. This is sometimes happens for some very remote countries which don't have a compute location for them, and but there is no way to manage this one. It is an automated one. It measures the nearest distance and then tries to build the tunnel towards the nearest location. Okay, how to onboard large number of ZTNA connectors using APIs and automation. So we have a URL. I've given it in the document in the slide deck. So here under this connectors, under this pan.dev, where all the APIs for all the SASE solution is available, under the connector we have all these under the ZTNA page, right? API ZTNA pan.dev. We have all these API calls. So if you have um, a, a developer who can build the code built from any one of these programming language, make these API calls with the token authorization token, he will be able to uh, deploy large number of characters in the Starter Cloud Manager. So all these are very self-explanatory. The API to use, API to fetch the information, API to create, get, put, post. So this is specifically designed for large deployments when you want to automate it and scale it. You don't want to go individually and create one by one connector. Okay, so uh, yeah, you need to have a token and a secret on the tenant, and you can use these APIs and pass on these header information to build your ZTNA solution through API and automation. Okay, the next one is the two arm deployment. This is a very common problem. Sometimes happens, especially in a lab environment, when customer is testing the ZTNA solution. So what happens is the deployment is done on a two arm, but the same layer 3 subnet is used for both port 1 and port 2. So this would sometimes work, sometimes may not work. It is not recommended to use the same layer 3 segment for. If you have that use case, then you should consider one arm where both your internet and LAN port are in the same layer 3 domain, layer 2 domain. Okay, you cannot use same default gateway for the LAN as well as the internet. You need to have different layer 3 segments attached to it if you're using a two arm. ZTNA connector software process for flow control is stuck in Fatal. So as I mentioned, I showed this situation whenever you configure less number of CPU cores or number of memory which is required for the connector, you will end up with this state where it doesn't have the resources to start up these daemons or these processes. Usually, I mean, ZTNA connector needs 8 GB of memory in ESX. Assuming this value, sometimes some of the deployments are planned for using 8 GB in Hyper-V and KVM. So this specific hypervisor platform requires 16 GB of physical memory allocated to the VM. Otherwise, the instance will not be able to start these processes, and then the connector will not be able to be onboarded. We are not able to delete the ZTNA connector or the connector group from SCM. Suppose you need to decommission or remove some of the config, and when you do it, you get an error popped up to the screen. So at this instance, what you can do is you need to enable the developer tools in your browser, whichever browser you are using, and then generate a HAR file while performing this action. So how to capture this HAR file is captured in this KB article. You can refer to this and then generate the HAR file, and then create a support ticket for understanding what is the problem due to which you're not able to perform this action. Okay. So if you just mention that I'm not able to delete and we don't have this information, it would extend the time required to solve the problem, because we need to connect and you need to understand that this is something which we require when you perform the action, and then for investigating why this is not happening. And so that's the context in which I'm sharing this information. So every time we have a request, if this file is there, it saves a lot of time. Okay. How to perform update or delete to connector IP blocks in SCM? Unable to perform. So when you're unable to perform, again, the same thing applies. If you capture the HAR file for any function which is expected to work but not working, attach it to the ticket and then share the information. Can IP connector block or IP application block or P infrastructure or GP pool IP subnets overlap? It cannot be overlap. It needs to be all unique. Okay, so this is a mandatory. You cannot use an overlapping subnets across the different components of Prisma Access. The FQDN targets and wildcard targets allow you to connect overlapping networks, but within Prisma Access, these IP address blocks need to be unique. You cannot overlap with each other. The remote network users are unable to connect to private apps behind ZTNA connector. So DNS proxy is a service which is running in the RNSPN that will be required to be configured as the DNS server for the clients. And how to do that is captured in this document, very well written document. You can refer to this document and then accordingly configure. You need to configure this for remote network users in Prisma Access to access the ZTNA private apps. Okay. With this, we complete this session. So I've tried my best to uh, give all the necessary information related to troubleshooting as well as monitoring and various use cases and were quite frequently asked questions by users of ZTNA in this session today. And also, wherever possible, wherever there has been challenges such as serial console to the hypervisor ESX for the ZTNA connector, I have captured the steps as well as put a small video clip for you to understand how to do it. Okay.
Fantastic. Faisal, Chinthaka, both of you, thank you very much for everything. We have a couple last minute questions coming in. First question, I must, Chinthaka may be answering it already. I'll just throw the question to you. Does ZC informs its public IP to PA Cont and PA Cont use geolocation to connect it with the nearest POP?
Charles, can you enable speaker for a host so that Chintaka can talk?
Sure, no worries. All right, Chintaka, you should be enabled now.
Hey, hi everyone. So yes, the I was just typing it in, but for the public, how we actually identify the closest location is based on the public IP. What you have mentioned is correct. And the question around there is this session is to set up in VPN infra in DC. Where do we control the end user? Yes. So Abdul, like I mentioned, CTNA connector is part of a bigger fabric. Whereas in, for example, we set up the Prismas as a fabric with mobile users, remote networks, and all of those things. And where CTNA connector comes in is when you want to enable access to the data center resources, right? So that's where you will onboard the CTNA connector. So we have these virtual images that readily available on cloud environments, like Faisal pointed out yesterday, where you can go ahead and deploy those images and test it out. So if you already have a SaaS tenant, you can onboard a CTNA connector, you can play around it. And because it's just a additional connection to a private location, there's nothing major that you need to consider, so you can play around in that way. So the whole idea of this session is for you to understand that, okay, where do you use the CTNA connector, how do you deploy the CTNA connector, and then today we talked about, in case if something is not coming up or you want to see something has gone wrong in the CTNA connector, where do you troubleshoot, how do you get the tech support files and those things. So that's the idea we covered in the couple of days.
Fantastic. I hope that answers your questions there. Apparently it does. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. It's good to get confirmation when the questions are actually answered. So fantastic. Okay, so we're going to be wrapping it up in just a moment here. If anyone has any last minute questions, now's the time to ask them. I do want to take this chance to thank Faisal and Chinthaka very much for taking your time. Excuse me, I know it may be your job to do this kind of thing, but nonetheless, I do greatly appreciate you guys taking the extra time to put together these presentations, answer everyone's questions in the chat and whatnot. It is greatly appreciated, and look forward to hopefully having you guys back for some events in the future.
Thanks, Charles.
Yep, thank you. Looks like we don't have any more questions. I will go ahead and let both of you guys go now then.
Yep.
Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to the workshop and for your patience. And if you have any questions, you can, or any topics you'd like to hear from us related to ZTNA or Prisma Access, do let us know. We will try to organize a workshop for you. It was a pleasure to share this information related to ZTNA and the design, the base overview, the architecture, the troubleshooting. I hope it's being useful for you and help you in your journey towards using this product from Palo Alto Networks. Okay.
Yep. And feel free, and any requests you guys do have, feel free to send them to me, fuel@fuelusergroup.org. We will pass them along to the proper teams to go ahead and get the session set up. So,
bye.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'll let you go.